The Velthary scout vessel drifted through a field of death and silence, its pale blue hull catching the distant light of stars that did not care what happened here. Commander Cyril stood at the observation window and watched the debris float past her ship, and she felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the bridge. There were bodies out there, thousands of them, human bodies, frozen solid in the vacuum of space. Their faces locked in expressions of terror and confusion and desperate hope that help would come. Help had not come. The Keth Dominion had found the human colony ship 3 days ago, and they had done what the Keth always did when they found a species weaker than themselves. They had killed everyone. Cyril turned away from the window and looked at her crew, and she saw the same exhaustion on their faces that she felt in her bones. "We should leave," said her second officer, a tall Velthary named Catherine, who had served with her for 6 years. "The Keth patrol routes pass through this sector every 12 hours, and if they find us here, they will not ask questions before they fire." He was right. Cyril knew he was right. The Velthary had survived this long by being careful, by staying out of conflicts that did not concern them, by never giving the Keth a reason to turn their attention toward Velthary space. Humans were not the Velthary's concern. Humans were a minor species, barely capable of traveling between stars, and they had made the mistake of expanding into territory the Keth considered theirs. It was tragic. Yes, it was cruel. Yes, but it was not the Velthary's problem. "One more sweep," Cyril said. And she did not know why she said it. "Scan for life signs one more time, and then we will go." Catherine stared at her like she had lost her mind. And perhaps she had. "Commander, there are no survivors here, and the Keth are thorough in their work, and we both know this." "One more sweep," Cyril repeated. And her voice was harder now, the voice of a commander who expected to be obeyed. Catherine sighed and turned to the sensor station and began the scan. Cyril watched him work and wondered what she was hoping to find. The answer came 30 seconds later. "Commander," Catherine said, and his voice was strange now, confused and almost frightened. "There is a life sign, and it is weak, but it is there." In the cargo section of the main wreckage, Cyril was moving before she finished processing his words, walking toward the shuttle bay with long, quick strides. "Commander, this is foolish," Catherine called after her. "We cannot risk the ship for one human, and even if we save them, what then? We cannot keep them, and we cannot return them to their people, because their people are dead." She did not stop. She did not turn around. She simply said, "You have command until I return." And she kept walking. The shuttle ride to the wreckage took 4 minutes. And during those 4 minutes, Cyril told herself that this was a mistake, that Catherine was right, that she was risking her ship and her crew for nothing. But she did not turn back. The cargo bay was open to space, its hull torn apart by Keth weapons. And Cyril had to climb through twisted metal and frozen debris to reach the source of the life sign. She found him in a corner, curled into a ball behind a stack of supply crates that had somehow survived the destruction. He was a human child, a boy, perhaps 7 years old by human counting, with dark hair and dark eyes and skin that had gone pale from cold and hunger and fear. He was holding his mother's hand. His mother was dead, frozen solid like all the others, her body positioned as if she had been trying to shield him from something when the end came. The boy looked up at Cyril, and he did not scream, and he did not cry, and he did not run. He just looked at her with eyes that had seen too much horror to feel anything anymore. "Hello," Cyril said, and she knelt down so she was at his level. And she spoke in the human language that all Velthary officers were required to learn. "My name is Cyril, and I am here to help you." The boy did not answer. He just kept holding his mother's hand. Cyril reached out slowly, carefully, and she took the boy's other hand in hers. And his fingers were so cold, she was amazed. He was still alive. "You have to come with me now," she said. "You cannot stay here." The boy looked at his mother, and then he looked at Cyril. And something in his eyes shifted. He let go of his mother's hand. He let Cyril pick him up. He buried his face in her shoulder. And he did not make a sound, not a single sound, as she carried him back to the shuttle on the ship. The medical officer examined him and told Cyril that the boy had not eaten in 6 days, that he was severely dehydrated, that by all reasonable measures, he should have died long before they found him, but he had not died humans. The medical officer said, "We're surprisingly difficult to kill." Catherine came to her quarters that night, and his face was serious. "What do you intend to do with him?" he asked. "I do not know yet. The regulations are clear," Catherine said. "We are not permitted to interfere with the affairs of other species, and we are certainly not permitted to adopt their orphans. And if the council learns what you have done, they will have your command." "Then the council will not learn," Cyril said. "We will tell them he is a specimen for study, a subject for research into human biology, and we will keep him until I can find somewhere safe to leave him." Catherine looked at her for a long moment. "You will not find somewhere safe to leave him," he said. "You will keep him, and you will raise him, and you will tell yourself every day that tomorrow you will find a solution." Cyril did not answer. She did not have to. They both knew he was right. The boy's name was Marcus Cole. He was 7 years old. He was the last survivor of 10,000 humans, and he was now the responsibility of a Valkyrie commander who had no idea what she was doing, but who could not bring herself to abandon him. This was how it began. One act of mercy. One child saved. One debt created that would take 20 years to come due. 20 years changed many things. Marcus Cole was no longer a frightened boy hiding in the wreckage of his mother's ship. And he was no longer the silent child who would not speak for 6 months after his rescue. He was a man now, tall and strong and quiet in a way that made other beings nervous. And he lived in the spaces between worlds where nobody asked questions and nobody wanted answers. The Valkyrie who knew he existed called him Cyril's pet project, and the ones who did not know he existed were the majority. And Marcus preferred it that way. He worked as a freelance engineer on the edge of Valkyrie space, fixing ships that came to him with damage they did not want to explain. And he asked no questions about where the damage came from, or why they could not go to a proper repair station. The work was steady and the pay was good, and it allowed him to stay invisible. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant the Keth would never learn that one human had survived their massacre. And invisible meant the Valkyrie Council would never discover that Commander Cyril had broken their most sacred laws to save an alien. Child Cyril had risen in rank over the years, and she was now Fleet Admiral Cyril, one of the highest military authorities in the Valkyrie government. And Marcus knew that his existence was a threat to everything she had built. He stayed away from her. She sent messages sometimes, checking on him, asking if he needed anything. And he always replied that he was fine, that she did not need to worry, that she had done enough for him already. He never told her that he thought about her every day. He never told her that he had learned to repair ships because she had taught him, that he had learned to survive because she had shown him how, that everything he was came from the mercy she had shown him when he was a broken child with nothing left. Some debts could not be spoken. Some debts could only be carried. Marcus was in his workshop when the news came, elbow deep in the engine of a transport ship that had taken damage from what the captain claimed was an asteroid collision, but which Marcus recognized as weapons fire. The Keth had attacked Valkyrie Prime. The words hit him like a physical blow, and he stopped working. And he stood there with engine grease on his hands and listened to the reports that came flooding through every communication channel. The Keth Dominion had finally turned its attention toward the Valkyrie, and their first strikes had destroyed the orbital defense network in less than 4 hours. and the Valkyrie fleet was scrambling to respond, but they were outnumbered and outgunned, and everyone knew it. Marcus thought of Ciravel. He thought of her on her flagship, giving orders, trying to hold together a defense that was already falling apart. He thought of her dying in the vacuum of space the same way his mother had died 20 years ago, and something inside him shifted. He was moving before he made a conscious decision, grabbing tools and supplies and throwing them into a bag. And he was running toward the docking bay, where he kept his personal ship. A fast little vessel he had built himself from salvaged parts. The captain of the transport ship called after him, asking where he was going, asking when he would be back to finish the repairs. Marcus did not answer. He did not have time to answer. The journey to Valkyrie space took 6 hours at maximum speed. And during those 6 hours, Marcus listened to the battle reports and watched the situation grow worse with every passing minute. The Valkyrie fleet was breaking. Ships were being destroyed faster than reinforcements could arrive. And the Keth were pushing deeper into Valkyrie territory with every passing hour. And somewhere in that chaos was Ciravel. He found her by tracking her flagship's distress beacon. The ship was dead. Its hull breached in a dozen places, and it was drifting toward a station that the Keth had already captured. And there were enemy patrols everywhere. Marcus flew into the debris field anyway. He maxed velocity with the dying flagship and extended his docking tube and cut through the hull with a plasma torch. And he climbed into darkness and death and the smell of burning metal. He found her on the bridge. She was wounded. A piece of shrapnel embedded in her side. And she was the only one still breathing among a crew of 200 when she saw him. Her eyes went wide, and she tried to speak. But the words came out as a cough that sprayed blue blood across the deck. "Do not talk," Marcus said. And he knelt beside her and started applying medical patches with hands that were steady despite the fear that filled his chest. "Save your strength, because I'm getting you out of here, Marcus," she whispered. And her voice was weak. "You should not have come, and you cannot save me. And the Keth will find you. Then let them find me." He lifted her carefully, supporting her weight against his body. And he carried her back through the ship, the same way she had carried him through the wreckage of his colony ship 20 years ago. The trip back to his vessel felt like an eternity. And every second he expected Keth fighters to appear on his sensors. But somehow they made it. Somehow they escaped. He set course for deep space, away from the battle, away from the Keth. And Ciravel lay in the medical bay and told him he was a fool. "The Valkyrie are finished," she said. "There is nowhere left to run, and you should have stayed hidden. And now you will die with the rest of us." Marcus looked at her, and he thought about the boy who had held his mother's hand while the universe burned around him. And he thought about the woman who had reached into that darkness and pulled him out. "There is one place we can go," he said. "Where?" Marcus turned back to the navigation console and entered coordinates he had memorized years ago. Coordinates that every human child learned before they learned to read Earth, he said. "We are going to Earth." Ciravel stared at him like he had gone insane. "Earth is a dead world. And your people retreated there after the massacre. And no one has heard from them in 20 years. "Yes," Marcus said. And there was something in his voice now. Something hard and cold and almost frightening. "No one has heard from them, and that is exactly why we are going." He engaged the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched into lines around them. And Marcus Cole took the alien who had saved his life back to the homeworld she had never expected to see. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. And immediately every alarm on the console began to scream. Ciravel pushed herself up from the medical bay bed where she had been recovering, and she limped to the cockpit. And what she saw through the viewport made her forget about the pain in her side. There were ships everywhere. Human ships. Thousands of them arranged in defensive formations that covered every approach to the inner system. And their weapons were already locked onto. Marcus's vessel But these were not the primitive craft the galaxy remembered. These ships were sleek and deadly, and built with technology that should have been decades beyond human capability. And Cyril recognized design elements from a dozen different species, woven into their hull's Veltri shield. Configurations, Keth weapon systems, engine designs from species she had thought extinct. "What is this?" she whispered. Marcus did not answer. He was too busy responding to the hailing frequency that was demanding his identification. "This is Marcus Cole," he said into the communicator. "Survivor of the colony ship Aurora, raised among the Veltri. And I am bringing a wounded alien officer who has intelligence on the Keth invasion." There was a long silence. Then a human voice replied, cold and professional and completely unsurprised. "Marcus Cole, your identity has been confirmed, and you are cleared for approach to Station Prime. And follow the escort ships, and do not deviate from the assigned flight path." Two fires appeared beside his vessel, their weapons powered down, but their posture making it clear they would respond to any unexpected movements. Marcus followed them without complaint. The flight to Station Prime took 30 minutes. And during that time, Cyril stared out the viewport and tried to understand what she was seeing. This was not the broken remnant of a species that had given up. This was a military force, prepared and equipped and waiting for something. "You knew," she said to Marcus. "You knew they were building this." "No," Marcus said, "but I hoped, and I knew my people. And I knew they would not simply accept what the Keth did to us." Station Prime was enormous, a military installation the size of a small moon. And inside it, Cyril found herself facing a room full of humans who looked at her with eyes that held no trust and no welcome. They called themselves the United Earth Defense Council, and they were the leaders of humanity's secret preparation for the war everyone knew was coming. An old man with silver hair and scars on his face sat at the center of the table, and he introduced himself as General Chun. And he asked Cyril questions. What were the Keth weaknesses? What did the Veltri know about their fleet movements? What could she tell them about enemy numbers and tactics and supply lines? Cyril answered honestly. She told him about the Keth Command Nexus, the neural network that allowed their fleet to coordinate with perfect precision. And she told them about the blind spots in Keth sensor technology. And she told them about the arrogance that made the Keth underestimate every species they had not yet defeated. The council listened without interruption. When she finished, General Chun looked at her for a long moment. And then he asked a question she did not expect. "Why should we believe you?" Cyril blinked. "Have given you valuable intelligence, and I have risked my life to come here, and I do not understand." "You are Veltri," General Chun said. "Your people watched the Keth slaughter human colonists for decades, and you did nothing, and your laws forbade any interference. And you let us die alone." The words hit Cyril like a blow, and she looked at Marcus, and she saw that he was watching her with an expression she could not read. "I saved Marcus," she said finally. 20 years ago, I found him in the wreckage of his colony ship, and I took him against all regulations, and I raised him as my own. One child," General Chun said. "You saved one child out of 10,000, and you want us to trust you because of that?" "Yes," Cyril said, and she stood straighter despite the pain in her side. "I saved one child, and it cost me everything, and I would do it again. And if that is not enough for you, then I do not know what else I can offer." The room was silent, and General Chun nodded slowly. And something in his expression shifted. 20 years ago, he said, "We received a report that one of our children had survived the Aurora massacre, and we tracked that child to Veltri space. And we watched him grow up under the protection of an alien commander who had broken her own laws to save him." Cyril felt her blood turn cold. "You knew. We knew everything," General Chun said. "We watched Marcus, and we watched you, And we learned something important from your actions. What did you learn? The old general leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, something almost warm entered his eyes. We learned that not everyone in the galaxy is our enemy. And we learned that kindness exists even in the darkest places. And we learned that if we ever had the power to fight back, we should remember who helped us and who did not. He gestured to the walls around them, to the station, to the fleet waiting outside. We built all of this because of you, he said. Not to get revenge for what the Keth did, but to protect the possibility that mercy still exists in the universe. And we are going to use it to save your people. Cyril felt tears forming in her eyes. And she did not try to hide them. Why? She asked. And her voice broke on the word. You owe us nothing. And one child is not worth all of this. General Chun looked at Marcus, and Marcus looked back. And some silent communication passed between them. You are wrong, General Chun said. One child is worth exactly this much. And we are about to show the galaxy what happens when you spare a human life. He stood up from the table. Prepare the fleet, he said to his officers. We are going to Volthuri Prime. The Keth Dominion had conquered 63 species across 4 centuries. And in all that time, they had never known fear. Fear was weakness. And weakness had been bred out of the Keth generations ago. And they believed this made them strong. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, like a tide of steel and fire. 3,000 ships materializing in Volthuri space in perfect formation. And the Keth commanders stared at their sensors and tried to understand what they were seeing. This was impossible. Humans were primitive. A species barely capable of leaving their own solar system. A race that had retreated to their homeworld 20 years ago and never emerged again. These ships were not primitive. These ships were built for war. The first human weapons reached the Keth fleet before they could react. Missiles and energy beams and projectiles that tore through shields designed to withstand anything the galaxy could throw at them. But the ships were not the only surprise mixed into the human formation were vessels of other designs. Ships that the Keth recognized from species they had already exterminated, ships of the Turani, who the Keth had wiped out 30 years ago, ships of the Ves, who had been destroyed before that, ships of the Malachi, the Sent, the Uravi, and half a dozen other civilizations that should not have existed anymore. The humans had found the survivors. Across 20 years of secret work, humanity had reached out to every species the Keth had attacked. And they had found the refugees, the scattered remnants, the ones who had escaped the genocide by luck or skill or desperate determination, and they had given them a choice. Come with us, the humans had said, and we will give you weapons and training and ships. And we will give you the chance to fight back against the ones who destroyed your worlds. Every single survivor had said yes. Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of a human destroyer and watched the battle unfold on tactical displays. And he felt something cold and sharp rising in his chest. This was vengeance. This was justice. This was the galaxy learning what happened when you pushed humanity too far. Beside him stood Cyril. Her wounds healed enough that she could walk without assistance. And beside her stood warriors from 6 different species that the Keth had thought they had eliminated. The Keth are not retreating, Cyril said. Her eyes fixed on the display. They do not understand what is happening. And they are still trying to follow their standard attack patterns. They will learn, Marcus said. Or they will die, and either way works for me. A human officer approached them. A young woman with short dark hair and the insignia of a special operations unit on her uniform, Commander Cole. She said, "The strike team is ready, and we are prepared to deploy on your order." Marcus looked at Cyril. "Are you sure you want to come?" he asked. This mission will be dangerous, and you are still recovering. I'm sure, Cyril said. The Keth took everything from my people, and I want to be there when we take it back. Marcus nodded and turned to the officer. Deploy the shuttle, he said. We are going after the command nexus. The Keth command nexus was the key to everything. It was a network of neural connections that linked every ship in the Keth fleet, allowing them to coordinate with a precision no other species could match. And it was located on a heavily defended station deep behind enemy lines if they could destroy it. The Keth fleet would lose its coordination. Ships that had operated as a single perfect organism would become individual vessels. Confused and disoriented, unable to respond to the chaos of battle with their usual efficiency, the strike team consisted of 20 soldiers, 5 humans, including Marcus' 3 Velthari volunteers who had joined the coalition. After learning what the humans were planning, 2 Taurani warriors whose entire civilization had been wiped out by the Keth 4 Ves, survivors who had spent 15 years dreaming of this moment, and 6 others from species so devastated by Keth attacks that fewer than 100 of their kind still existed. They were not an army, they were a message. The shuttle dropped them on the command station through a hull breach created by human weapons, and they fought their way through corridors filled with Keth soldiers who could not understand why they were losing. The Keth were bigger than humans, stronger, faster, bred for combat across hundreds of generations. But the strike team was fighting for something more than victory. They were fighting for every child who had died in a Keth attack. They were fighting for every species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They were fighting for the simple principle that mercy should be rewarded and cruelty should be punished. Marcus reached the core of the command nexus first, his weapon hot in his hands and his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was vast, filled with organic technology that pulsed with an ugly blue light. And at the center of it all was the primary control node. Destroying it would take the entire network offline. Cover me, he said to Cyril, and he moved toward the node while she and the others held the entrance against the Keth reinforcements that were flooding toward them. He placed the charges carefully, precisely, the way he had been trained. Then he stepped back and activated the detonator. The explosion was beautiful. The command nexus died in a cascade of fire and sparks. And across the battlefield, the Keth fleet faltered. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly became confused, their commanders unable to communicate, their formations dissolving into chaos. The human fleet pressed the advantage by the time Marcus and his team escaped the station. The tide of battle had turned completely. The Keth were in full retreat. We did it, one of the Ves warriors said, his voice filled with wonder. We actually did it. Marcus looked at Cyril, and she looked back at him. And for the first time since she had been rescued from her dying flagship, she smiled. Yes, she said. We did. The battle was not over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Keth Dominion had finally met an enemy they could not defeat. The Battle of Velthari Prime lasted 11 days. 11 days of fire and death and desperate fighting. 11 days of human ships standing between the Keth and a world they had no obligation to protect. 11 days of a coalition of broken species, proving that they were not as broken as the galaxy believed. On the 12th day, the Keth retreated. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the human dreadnought, Retribution, and watched the enemy fleet flee into deep space. Their formations scattered, their command structure shattered, their confidence destroyed for 400 years. The Keth had never lost a major battle. Now they ran like frightened animals, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. Cyril stood beside him, her blue skin pale from exhaustion, but her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. I do not understand, she said quietly. I have been trying to understand for days, and I still do not. Understand what? She turned to face him. and her expression was filled with genuine confusion. "All of this," she said, and she gestured at the ships around them, at the planet below them, at everything humanity had built and sacrificed. "You owed us nothing, and 20 years ago I saved one child. One single child out of thousands, and now your entire species has gone to war for my people." Marcus was silent for a long moment. He thought about the boy he had been, the one who had hidden in the wreckage of a cargo bay and held his mother's frozen hand. He thought about the alien woman who had climbed through the debris to find him, who had looked at a terrified human child and seen something worth saving. He thought about the years she had spent raising him, teaching him, protecting him from a galaxy that would have killed him without a second thought. "Do you remember what you told me?" he said finally, "the first night after you rescued me, when I would not eat and I would not speak, and you thought I might simply give up and die." Cyril shook her head. "I do not remember. You told me that the universe was dark and cold and cruel, but that sometimes, if you looked hard enough, you could find small lights in the darkness. And you told me that those lights were worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth living for." He turned to look at her. "You were my light," he said, "when everything else was gone. When my family was dead and my people were scattered and I had nothing left. You were the proof that kindness still existed somewhere in the galaxy." Cyril's eyes glistened with tears she did not shed. "I was just one person," she said. "I just did what I thought was right." "Yes," Marcus said. "And that is exactly why we are here." He looked back at the stars, at the retreating Keth fleet, at the world they had saved. "We did not build this fleet for revenge," he said. "We did not spend 20 years preparing just to punish the Keth for what they did to us. And when General Chun told you that we built all of this because of you, he was telling the truth. I still do not understand." "You showed us something important," Marcus said. "You showed us that mercy exists even when it costs you everything. And you showed us that one person can make a choice that changes the course of history. And you showed us that the galaxy is not just predators and prey." He paused. "We built this fleet to protect that truth," he said. "We built it because if kindness can exist in one Velthari commander, then it can exist in others. And if it can exist in others, then it is worth defending. And if it is worth defending, then it is worth any price we have to pay." Cyril was crying now, silent tears running down her blue cheeks. "All of this," she whispered, "because I saved one child." "No," Marcus said. And he reached out and took her hand the same way she had taken his 20 years ago in that frozen cargo bay. "All of this because you showed us what humanity should be. And now we are showing the galaxy what we learned, below them." Velthari Prime burned in places, cities damaged by Keth weapons, landscapes scarred by orbital bombardment, but the planet was alive. Its people were alive, and they would rebuild in the weeks that followed. The Keth Dominion did not fall, but they did something they had never done in 4 centuries of conquest. They negotiated. They agreed to withdraw from Velthari space. They agreed to release the species they had enslaved. They agreed to pay reparations to the civilizations they had devastated. They were not defeated, not completely, but they were broken in a way that mattered more than military losses. They had learned that the galaxy was not as helpless as they had believed. Earth became something new in the years that followed. It became a sanctuary, a place where species on the edge of extinction could find protection, where refugees could find homes, where the desperate could find hope. The Velthari were the first to join the alliance, but they were not the last species after species came to Earth. Drawn by the story of what humanity had done, drawn by the promise that they would never have to face the darkness alone again, they called it the Compact of Repayment. The name was Marcus's idea. It was built on a simple principle, one that he had learned from a Velthari commander who had broken every rule to save one human child. No act of kindness is too small to matter. No debt of mercy is ever forgotten. Marcus became humanity's first ambassador to the Velthari, and Cyril became the Veltharies' first ambassador to Earth. They spent the rest of their lives arguing about whose people made worse coffee and whose had saved whose life more times. Neither of them kept count. Both of them knew the answer did not matter. What mattered was the truth they had proven together. The truth that one small light in the darkness could ignite a fire that changed the galaxy. What mattered was the simple fact that mercy, once given, is never wasted. What mattered was that Earth had repaid its debt, and in doing so, had shown the universe what humanity truly was. Not a species of victims, not a species of conquerors, but a species that remembered, a species that kept its promises, a species that would always pay back what it owed. The Keth had spared a single human. Earth had repaid them with an army, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned.